Hello, Taste of Culture class. Happy May term. My name is Hope Rasmussen, and today I'm going to be talking about my experience in Cusco, Peru. So, a little bit about me. I graduated from Central Lyon in 2017, and then I went on to South Dakota State to double major in Spanish and nutrition. So, I graduated last May, and then now I'm at Illinois State University getting my master's in nutrition, and then I will end in December. So when I was at South Dakota State, because of COVID, I couldn't study abroad like I planned to. So I looked online at some different websites and some different opportunities, and I found this really awesome website called Projects Abroad. And Projects Abroad is a social enterprise. So basically, what you do is you can just sign up through here, and then they have like different projects that are going on all across the world, and you can volunteer at different sites all across the world. So I found one that was in Peru, and it was a nutrition internship. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is perfect because it has nutrition and Spanish, just what I graduated in. So on the website, it says you can gain practical experience working alongside nurses and continuing the research to improve health in disadvantaged communities, help people with problems such as malnutrition, for which children remain the most common victims. I will visit families during home-to-home visits and raise awareness by delivering presentations to vulnerable groups. So I thought this was amazing because you can start literally anytime, and you just have to stay there for at least 2 weeks and then speak intermediate Spanish and be over 16. So I signed up last June, and I stayed there for 5 weeks. So on my birthday, I went to a wedding, and then the next day, I went on a plane to Peru. And this was about a 24-hour travel session. I went from Minneapolis to LA to Lima to Cusco. So a lot of different plane rides. And something funny too is that when I got into Peru, they did not know how to pronounce my name. They couldn't say Hope because the P at the end, they don't have that pronunciation in Spanish. So they would pronounce it Ho, and they have like a little ha at the end because the G in Spanish is ha. So they would say ho. So that's what they wrote on my coffee. I eventually made it to Cusco. This was my first time traveling alone, let alone across the country to a different one. So yes, on the plane, we had to wear a mask and a visor. And then I eventually made it to Cusco, and this was my room. So they had a cute little map there from Iowa to Peru. They gave me some chocolates native to Peru. And then, yeah, I would stay there and I would sleep in that little bed. Side note, I did get bed bugs in that bed. However, these are less severe bed bugs than they are in the US sometimes, because all you have to do is just change the seats and it's back to normal. But that was not a pleasant experience, but the rest was great. So this was my host family. Shayla was the mom, so she was a stay-at-home mom, and she would take care of grandma. Grandma was Francisca, who would basically just stay in her room, and I would see her sometimes like for lunch and stuff like that. And then Santi was my brother on the right there, and he is Shayla's or son. And then Maria on the left side is Santi's girlfriend, and she's actually from Germany. And then on the right side of Shayla, there's Ugo, and Ugo didn't come until like my 3rd week in, and he's actually from France. So he was a volunteer or an intern like me, and he was doing archaeology. So my host family and I became very close. We were like any other family. We would do everything together. Um, Ugo and I were having a lot of fun. We were testing our wingspan, which are with our length. Um, Shayla was super sweet. She would cook the best meals, and she was a really like a mom. Like she would make sure I would bring sunscreen and be home by a certain time and wash my hands right when I got in the door. And Maria was like one of my best friends while I was there. Her and I would do a lot of things together. She really enjoyed talking about culture. And interesting enough, everybody knew English. Santi knew English, Maria knew English, and Ugo knew English. So we could all speak in English to each other. We all knew Spanish, so we could all speak in Spanish to each other. However, I did not know German nor French. So at the dinner table, a lot of times there were four different languages going on: French, German, English, and Spanish. And the host mom did not know English. So whenever we didn't want her to know something, we would just talk in English. Just kidding. So this was the host family's house. And we spent most of our time, I would say, together at the dinner table. We would talk for hours. Like, this is so different than the US because in the US, like, yes, you have a conversation at the dinner table, but it ends probably after what, 30 minutes, if even. But here we would just talk about literally everything. And everything was just so dramatic too, because the language of Spanish is just very dramatic. Um, and then it was very decorated as well. So it had a lot of whatever holiday it was, she would have decorations for that. She was very proud of those. It was very colorful with a lot of reds, a lot of different plants. And then she had pictures up of religious figures and also of her family who was living and also those who are deceased. So I was actually there for my nutrition internship, and I did the internship from Monday through Friday, and then on the weekends I got some time off. So the first week I attended workshops about anemia. There, over 50% of children have anemia in Cusco. Um, so I don't know if you guys know what anemia is. We're going to talk a little bit about that later, but anemia is basically the deficiency of healthy red blood cells. So red blood cells are important for circulating oxygen through your blood. So without those, you just don't have enough oxygen and your body gets tired, and some other symptoms we'll talk about later. I also assisted actores sociales, which are social workers, basically, in home visits to mothers. So we would walk home to home, and whether that was through the street, whether that was to their stores, into their homes, we would walk for plenty of kilometers because it's kilometers there, not miles. Um, so on the bottom left there, that's actually outside of one of their homes. Um, Peru has a lot of poverty. So yeah, we would walk into their gates and then we would knock on the gate and then they would come out and let us into their quaint little home. On the right side there is a mom and her baby. So that's someone we were checking in on. In my head. There we go. Okay. Another thing I did was give some Spanish or some presentations in Spanish about anemia to the social workers. So kind of like how we treat anemia in the United States. And then I assisted a COVID inspection at the largest farmers market in Cusco. So COVID was very prevalent at the time. There was actually a mask mandate, both inside and outside. So to get into a store, you either had to wear a double mask or you had to wear a mask and a visor. I saw actually a girl wearing a triple mask one time, so that was definitely a first. But yeah, the only time you could really take it off was when you were in your home. And for a lot of hikes, we even had to wear them. So it was just very different, very interesting. I helped Yasmani, the nurse who was in charge of the district, with her thesis on the left side there. So I did a little bit of the statistics part. And then on the bottom, I volunteered at a daycare with the little kiddos. So I also attended a demonstration of foods that were rich in iron. So a little bit more about anemia, you guys are getting a nutrition lesson here, is that so iron is a part of hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is within the red blood cells. So hemoglobin is the part that carries the oxygen throughout the body. So without iron, remember iron makes up the hemoglobin, which carries the oxygen throughout the body. Without the iron, you can't carry the oxygen. So we need foods rich in iron in order to help with anemia. So these foods are a little bit different than what you think. So here in the US, what we would recommend would be like meats and like spinach and just like protein foods like that, like hearty protein foods. But here, it was a little bit heartier than, yeah, like I said, you would think. For example, we had liver, chicken blood, spleen, and lungs that we would make into recipes and demonstrate for them. So chicken blood was sangrecita, it's called, was a very common one. And the government gives out these little packages of sangrecita. And it's basically like coagulated blood. And you would just add that to different recipes. Like, for example, if you're making galletas, cookies, you just add some sangrecita in the little packet to it. And it's a little bit red, but it kind of covers up the flavor with the sweetness of it. So we had to try to incorporate these high hemoglobin or high iron foods into meals that they would eat. So it was very interesting. We also tested hemoglobin levels. So at the bottom there, I would poke the little boy's finger and get like a blood sample and see their hemoglobin level. And then we had to take into account the altitude because we were in the mountains, remember guys? So we were 11,000 feet basically above sea level. So I did many home visits with actores sociales who would check in to see how the baby was doing. And then I would give a talk about what anemia was, the consequences of anemia, and how to prevent it, and also what foods they should include and avoid. So on the left side there was me giving a presentation with my poster. Because the first day they asked me to talk a little bit about anemia in Spanish to this mother. And at that point, I didn't really know much about anemia nor anything in Spanish. So by the end of the 5 weeks, I had a system down. So it was really good. On the top there was a mother and her baby who we checked in on. And that's actually her house. Just a one room, fit her and her 2 kids. And on the bottom there, like I said, we would walk home to home, whether that be in their homes or in their stores or at their work or wherever or whenever was convenient for the mothers. So we would walk through the night and we made it to her store and we gave a presentation there. And there were customers that were just walking through, but anemia is so prevalent there that literally anytime it takes, like any moment you have, like we're gonna take advantage of that and give you an education session. So this was my poster that I used. It has the essential questions. ¿Qué es la anemia? What is anemia? ¿Por qué es importante el hierro? Why is iron important? I drew a little red blood cell right there to make it visually appealing. Síntomas de anemia, which were the symptoms of anemia, like I talked about before, fatigue, pale skin, really cold hands and extremities because there's not enough circulation, difficulty concentrating because there's no oxygen coming up to your brain, tachycardia, which is like a rapid heartbeat because your heart is working a lot faster to get that oxygen through. Yes, and then how do we prevent it? Well, like high iron foods. So I explained some before, sangre de pollo, chicken blood, res, which is beef, baso, spleen, bofe, morcillas, hígado. Hígado is liver, and bofe is lungs. And then you would help the absorption of iron with vitamin C. So like citric foods, like tomatoes and peppers. And then actually you would have to stay away from tea, milk, and coffee because this actually inhibits the absorption of iron. So a little nutrition lesson for you guys too. Another thing I did was work in Casa Mantai, and this was my last week. So Casa Mantai is a refuge for moms who had been sexually abused and for their children. So this was an escape for them. They would come here and they would work basically throughout the day. They would work in the kitchen, they would take care of the kids, and yeah, so that's how they would make their living. And I came in as a volunteer and I created a 30-day diet that was rich in iron because a lot of the kids there had anemia or were malnourished. I gave nutritional talks to mothers, and these mothers were your age. They were 13 to 16 years old. And then I helped in the kitchen too. Out of everything I did, I would say this is my favorite because I had a great time with little kids, and it was just so cool to see my work actually making an impact. So I would highly recommend, yeah, studying abroad or going on a mission trip or doing something like this. It's very rewarding. Another great factor about projects abroad was the social activities that it provided for you. So one of them was making chocolate at a museum. And here I learned a little bit about chocolate. I learned that mosquitoes actually pollinate cacao plants, so they are crucial in making chocolate. So this summer, when you're very annoyed by those mosquitoes, remember that they're the reason for your chocolate. Chocolate, I learned also, was created by Mayans, originally of cacao, honey, chili, and human blood. So these humans were sacrificed at ball game competitions, and their blood was used to make the first chocolate. Like crazy, right? The Spaniards thought it was crazy because when they came here and conquered, or they colonized Peru, they changed it. They changed the recipe into more what we have today. So they changed it to cacao, sugar, cinnamon, and milk, which sounds a lot better. Another social activity I did was a cooking class to make authentic Peruvian foods with other volunteers. So yes, there were other volunteers there besides Ugo and I. Ugo and I were the only older ones. The other ones were all high schoolers like you guys. So there were a lot of people from California, from New York, basically everywhere. And then I had salsa dance class with other volunteers. So that was really fun. So on the weekends, like I said, I got to do a little bit of traveling and exploring and adventuring. So I stayed in Cusco, and Cusco and the surrounding area contain extensive Incan ruins that reflect great skill in engineering, stonework, and architecture. So there are numerous walls built without mortar, and these stones were cut in irregular shapes and fitted in such precision that like a matchbox cover cannot be inserted into most seams. The famous stone of 12 angles, as you can see in the bottom right there, is a fine example of this construction. So I'm covering 2 of the angles, but there are 12 different angles. They're all made without mortar. It's kind of all fit in there without mortar. It's kind of crazy. The original streets of Cusco are narrow and frequently stepped. So they're on the left side there, that picture right there. And driving was a little bit crazy. Luckily, I did not drive, but I was afraid for my life whenever I was in a car. So the Spaniards colonized Cusco, and there were many beautiful Catholic churches built with an Incan influence. So an interesting thing is that the Incans were able to connect with Catholicism because just as they give honor to their different gods, like the sun god, etc., Catholicism asked the different saints for intercession. So they kind of connected that there. And that bottom picture is a picture of me over the whole city of Cusco. So Cusco is found in the valley of the Andes Mountains. Another place I went was Sacsayhuaman, which is the historic capital of the Incan Empire, which was built in the 15th century. They built dry stone walls construction of huge stones, and the workers carefully cut the boulders to fit them together tightly without mortar. And if you can see there on the right side, that's a picture of a paw, which represents one of their gods. So yeah, I thought that was really neat. And they dragged all of these stones over here. Like, wow, such power. Men and women, can you do that now? That's a good question. Okay, Asangate is a mountain of the mountain range of like the Andes Mountains. So it has an elevation of 20,944 feet. Guys, that's really high up there. I was feeling it when I was breathing. So this was one of the hardest hikes, I would say, just because it was so steep and there's not very much oxygen up when it's 20,000 feet in the air. So I was breathing really heavily. This region is inhabited by llama and alpaca herding. So those were some alpaca in the middle there. I didn't actually touch them. I was actually about like 20 feet away from them, but I got the effect of touching them. And on the right side there was a makeshift bathroom that they used up in the mountains. It was not very fancy. You had to step on both sides of the pallet and squat. So, and make sure not to fall in the hole. And they had seven different lakes from the glaciers. They were all absolutely beautiful. They were stunning, just the colors of them. And look at that sky, like there's no filter on that sky. That's so beautiful. So we hiked to these different lakes. One of the guys actually on our tour jumped in the lake and it was freezing, I bet. So that was my hiking group, and they were a really cool group actually. On the right side there, I made some friends with them, and then we met up actually like a couple weeks later randomly, like on a tour. I ran into them and they invited me to go out for one of their birthdays and celebrate. So it was just really cool. Marai is an archaeological site in Peru, and this is about 11,500 feet above sea level. So this site contains Incan ruins, mostly consisting of terraced circular depressions, as you can see there, those huge circles. What are they for, you might ask? Well, kind of like Iowa, for agriculture. So it was used for farming, and what they would do is they would make circular depressions so that there would be wide temperature differences to create microclimates. So they would kind of have like a study to see like the different climatic conditions on crops. So they made like over 1,000 kinds of potatoes here. I think more than that too. Maras is a town in the Sacred Valley of the Incas, and this town is well known for its salt evaporation ponds. So there are over 5,000 salt ponds, as you can see right there. It's really neat. It's really neat from the top. It's so beautiful. But basically what happens is there's like a spring, like a saltwater spring that goes through, and these ponds catch the salt water, and then with the evaporation after a few days, the water becomes super saturated, which means that salt starts coming out, and then they just get with their little nets just some salt. So that was really neat. And on the left side there was just a couple that I met. They were super cool, super nice. They like bought me some salt chocolate. So it's just super cool to meet people. And then this is the Sacred Valley of Valle Sagrado, where Maras and Morai were located. Umantai was another really hard hike, but it was so beautiful. Oh my gosh, look at that. It's like a hourglass. And it's considered one of the most beautiful and sacred lakes of Cusco. It's 13,700 feet above sea level. And look at those rocks, like the different colors of those, like, wow, so amazing. Machu Picchu was constructed as an estate for the Incan Empire, and it's referred to as the lost city of the Incas. This was built in 1450, but was abandoned a century later, when the Spanish conquest happened. And then it's actually one of the seven wonders of the world. So if you guys didn't hear about anything else in Peru, you guys have probably heard about Machu Picchu. I was here actually on the 4th of July last year, so it was really fun. And Rainbow Mountain was formed by weathering. So look at all those colors. It's actually in Spanish, it's called La Montaña de Siete Colores, the mountain of seven colors. So it's formed by weathering of environmental conditions and sedimentary deposits over time. It creates like a marbling effect with layered hues of gold, lavender, red and turquoise towering the sky, and it's about 17,000 feet above sea level. So this is very high as well. I had a really hard time in this hike. And to top it off, at the top, I definitely lost my phone and I was like, oh my goodness, where is my phone? But luckily I found it like 5 minutes later by a rock. So yes, I didn't tell my parents until I found it. So I actually got to go with one of my brothers, Ugo, to a few different sites. One of them was Tipone, which consists of different ruins enclosed by a powerful defensive wall of about 6 kilometers or 3.7 miles long. The most renowned part of the park is a group of precise and right-angled fountain or terraces irrigated by a network of water canals fed by a monumental fountain channeling water from a natural spring. So they were super like engineer oriented, I guess, and they would figure out how to make this like natural spring flow into like these different little irrigation systems, and it was really, really neat. Piquiacta is a village of the Wari people, and it was mainly used for some ceremonies, and it was not complete when it was abandoned, but it was still really neat. So Ugo and I on the right side there try to take a cool picture. I definitely fell, but at least we got a picture. You might be asking, what on earth is this hope? What am I seeing here? Well, that's a good question, and one I have the answer to. Peruvian elites in the 1100s were easy to spot because they had abnormally elongated skulls. So important members of the ancient group of Peru practiced head shaping, and a stretched, elongated look became the status symbol for elite Calagua. That was the group of Peruvians. So they likely modified the heads of babies using bandages or special hats in order to elongate their heads and create alien-shaped skulls. Wow, that's awesome. According to new research, this head-shaping practices may have provided a symbolic basis for the cooperation of elite groups during an era of intense conflict. So that was, yeah, a very interesting thing. And you can thank your parents that they never did this to you when you were fighting with your siblings. So another part, a specific part of your taste of culture class would be the tastes of Peru. So food there, like the eating schedule, we would eat breakfast at about 7 in the morning. Then we would have lunch around 2 to 3 o'clock. And then we would have supper around like 9 o'clock. So the lunch portion from 2 to 3 was this huge meal. It started off with like a bowl of soup, as you can see in the top there, caldo blanco. It's like potato soup. So they'd have different soups, and then followed by a huge plate of food. I definitely had to train my stomach to eat that much. But I mean, like your stomach is very hungry after like 7 hours of not eating food. So on the left side there is ají de gallina, which is chicken in a sauce with some olives and eggs, hard-boiled eggs over a bed of lettuce. On the right side there is lomo saltado, which is like fried steak, stir-fried steak with onions and peppers with some French fries on top, followed by rice. They had rice with about everything there. And then on the bottom was desayuno, my desayuno. Every morning for breakfast, I would have usually like bread with cheese and jam, and then cafecito, which is coffee. And then I had some plantains too. So gelatin is very popular there. While you might consider this as an old person food, there it was an every person food, every person dessert. Okuyo is a tuber. So think of like yams or something like that, like sweet potato. It's kind of like that. Pizza, instead of the good old ranch we have here, they actually serve pizza with mayo. So it's not like the mayo we have here. It kind of has like different seasoning. So it's a little bit more like ranch, but it's still mayo. It was very interesting. On the right side was choclo con queso, which they had on a lot of the hikes that I went on. They would just sell choclo con queso, choclo con queso. And the corn was not as sweet as it is here in Iowa. It was a little bit blander. However, it was really good with cheese. Another thing we had on the left side was not insects. I know it looks like insects, but it is actually roasted corn. It's very tasty. On the bottom, that's when I actually went out to celebrate a birthday with those people at the hiking group, and we had chicken wings and mate, which is tea. Tea is very popular there. On the top, coca tea, which is very significant in Peru. So the native people know this as like something to remedy altitude sickness. So you would have like right away when I got to Peru, my host mom gave me some coca tea and she said, here, this will help with your altitude sickness. So it just basically calms you. And coca tea has an interesting thing about it because they would have like a whole museum about coca tea because coca tea is like the precursor for cocaine. And they have to do a lot of things to the coca tea or coca plant to make cocaine. However, what I was having was the initial coca leaf, and all it did was just calm you. It's basically just like a tea, but there's kind of like a debate between people that don't know like what coca actually is because they think that they're having cocaine, but really it's not cocaine. And on the right side there was chifa, which is a Chinese and Peruvian fusion. So actually a lot of people from China immigrated to Peru, so they had different like fusions and stuff. Some Peruvian classics that you have to have when you're of age is pisco sour, which is like a kind of alcohol, and followed by lime, egg white, and sugar. And then on the right side there was ceviche. So I don't know if you guys have heard of ceviche, but it looks like raw fish, and it's not cooked by heat. However, it's cooked by acidity. So they would add some lime and then some salt, and that would actually cook the fish. So it was edible to eat. And while it was edible to eat, for me, it was not appealing because I don't like seafood. However, if you like seafood, you may like ceviche. One thing I also tried when I was there was koi, which is guinea pig. And koi is a celebratory meal. So like in the US, if you're of age, you have champagne to celebrate things, or sparkling champagne. And in Peru, they actually have koi to celebrate things. So these are not your pets. They're not like guinea pigs that are in like spinning in their wheel in your homes. Like these are guinea pigs that run wild within Peru. Guinea pigs, yes, are wild animals in Peru. So they're kind of like, I would say, rabbits in the United States. And they kind of taste like a rabbit too, or like kind of like a game meat. Yes, I did try it. I did not like it, but you might like it. So one of the reasons that I wanted to go to Peru because it was a Catholic country and it would have a lot of beautiful churches. So I'm Catholic, and unfortunately, due to COVID, they were all closed, which was just really unfortunate. So, I had a God moment, and so like a big part about culture in general is religion. So yes, like they're Catholic there. I'm Catholic. So one of the things I would do is I would listen to my daily morning devotional, which is a podcast. And it just talks about God and faith and just like gives you a little bit of a 5 minute little clip about faith. So then in one day I was listening to it and it challenged me to spend an extra 5 minutes with Jesus. And I'm like, well, like I was just kind of feeling bummed about it because I couldn't go to church to spend time with Jesus. So I'm like, I'm just gonna go about my day. And I went to the laundromat, la lavanderia, which that's the Spanish translation. So what you do there is drop off your clothes, and then the next day you would come back and get your clothes that were fresh and folded, and it was super nice. So I went to the lavanderia, and it was weird because there was this guy standing outside. So I was like, well, is it closed? And this guy, he's probably like middle-aged, I would say. And he looks at me and he was like, oh, I called and they're gonna be here in 5 minutes, but I'm just waiting. I'll just wait. So I waited with him for 5 minutes until the workers were coming. And in that 5 minutes, we had just like a normal conversation. We were just talking about like where we were from. This guy was actually natively Peruvian and he was from Peru, but he actually lived in the US. And then he was like complimenting my Spanish and we were just having a good conversation. And then when the workers came after 5 minutes, he let me go first and I thought it was super sweet. So I went up there and as I was putting my clothes on the table, I just had this sense to ask him like what his name was. So I looked at him and I was like, ¿Cómo te llamas? Like, what's your name? And then he said, Jesus. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just spent 5 minutes with Jesus. And it was really crazy. So that was my God moment, my biggest God moment for the trip. So that was just really beautiful. So I hope you guys had a little taste of culture from my presentation and enjoyed my talk about Peru. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can just ask Mrs. Christensen and she will direct you or email me or text me anything. And I'll just reply and get back to you. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your school year and say hi to Gabby for me. See you guys.